I discovered my husband's secret family after 15 years of marriage. Instead of confronting him, I planned an elaborate reveal that turned our anniversary party upside down. I, 39F, have been married to my husband Jake, 42M, for 15 years. We met in college, dated for a few years, and tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Jake has always been the perfect husband, attentive, loving, successful in his career as a marketing executive, and an amazing father to our 2 children, Emma, 12, and Ethan, 9. Our life seemed picture perfect, like something out of a Hallmark movie. That is, until 6 months ago, when I stumbled upon a secret that shattered my entire world. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. I was cleaning out our home office, sorting through old papers and files, when I came across a folder I'd never seen before. It was tucked away behind some tax documents, innocuous enough that I almost missed it. But something about it caught my eye. Maybe it was the way it was hidden, or perhaps it was just fate intervening. Inside the folder were documents that made my blood run cold. Bank statements for an account I didn't recognize. Receipts for gifts I'd never received. And most damning of all, a series of photos showing Jake with another woman and 2 children, a boy and a girl, both younger than our kids. My hands shook as I flipped through the evidence of my husband's betrayal. The woman in the photos was beautiful, with long dark hair and a warm smile. The children bore an unmistakable resemblance to Jake. In one photo, they were all gathered around a birthday cake, "Happy 8th birthday, Sophia," written in colorful icing. I felt like I was going to be sick. 15 years of marriage, and I never suspected a thing. How could he do this to me? To our children? How long had this been going on? I wanted to confront Jake immediately, to scream and cry and demand answers. But as the initial shock wore off, a different emotion took hold, cold, calculated anger. I realized that if I confronted him right away, he might try to lie his way out of it or, worse, leave me for his other family. No, I needed time to process this and figure out my next move. So I did what any rational person would do in this situation. I hired a private investigator. Over the next few months, I learned the full extent of Jake's deception. The other woman's name was Melissa. They had met at a conference in Seattle 8 years ago, right around the time I was pregnant with Ethan. Jake had been living a double life ever since, splitting his time between our family in Los Angeles and his secret family in Seattle under the guise of frequent business trips. I discovered that Melissa knew about me and our kids, but she believed that Jake and I were separated and in the process of divorcing. He had told her that he was staying with me for the children's sake until they were older. It seemed that Jake had been lying to everyone. As I uncovered more and more of Jake's lies, my anger grew. I thought about all the times he had missed important events in our children's lives, claiming he had unavoidable work commitments. All the while, he was probably attending school plays and soccer games for his other kids. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. I had to confront Jake and expose his lies. But I didn't want to do it in private, where he could manipulate me or try to explain it away. No, I wanted him to face the consequences of his actions in front of everyone who mattered to us. That's when I came up with my plan. Our 15th wedding anniversary was approaching, and we had already planned a big celebration. We were renewing our vows in front of friends and family, followed by a lavish reception. It was perfect, the ideal setting for my grand reveal. I spent weeks meticulously planning every detail. I gathered all the evidence, photos, bank statements, travel records, and created a PowerPoint presentation that would leave no doubt about Jake's double life. I hired a videographer, ostensibly to capture our vow renewal, but really to ensure that every moment of the reveal would be recorded for posterity and potential legal purposes. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal. I had to act like the loving, unsuspecting wife while rage boiled inside me. Every time Jake touched me or said "I love you," I had to resist the urge to scream in his face. But I knew it would all be worth it in the end. The day of our anniversary party arrived. I got my hair and makeup done, slipped into my beautiful renewal dress, and plastered a smile on my face. Jake looked handsome in his suit, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we once had. But then I remembered all his lies, and my resolve strengthened. The ceremony went off without a hitch. We renewed our vows in front of 100 of our closest friends and family. Jake's eyes welled up with tears as he promised to love and cherish me for all eternity. I wondered if he was thinking about Melissa and their kids as he said those words. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall. Everyone was in high spirits, drinking champagne and congratulating us on 15 years of wedded bliss. If only they knew. As the night wore on, it was time for the speeches. My maid of honor gave a touching tribute to our friendship and my parents spoke about watching our love grow over the years. Then it was Jake's turn. He stood up, glass in hand, and began to speak about our journey together. He talked about the ups and downs of marriage, about how much he loved me and our children. He even had the audacity to say, "I couldn't imagine my life without you, Sarah. You're my one and only." That was my cue. I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'd like to say a few words too," I announced. Jake looked surprised but pleased. Little did he know what was coming. "Jake, you just said I'm your one and only," I began, my voice dripping with sweetness. "But I think there are a few people who might disagree with that statement." The room fell silent. Jake's smile faltered. "In fact," I continued, "I think Melissa, Sophia, and little Jake Jr. might have something to say about that." The color drained from Jake's face. I saw confusion ripple through the crowd. It was time for the grand finale. "For those of you who don't know Melissa, Sophia, and Jake Jr., allow me to introduce you," I said, gesturing to the large screen behind me. With a click of a remote, the first slide of my presentation appeared, a family photo of Jake with his secret family. Gasps echoed through the room. Jake jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he hissed. "I'm telling the truth, Jake," I replied calmly. "Something you should have done a long time ago." For the next 20 minutes, I walked our guests through the evidence of Jake's double life. Bank statements showing years of payments to Melissa and the kids. Photos of family vacations and holidays spent with his other family. Travel records proving that his business trips were anything but. The room was in chaos. Jake's parents were in tears. My family looked ready to murder him. Our friends were whispering furiously among themselves. And Jake just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unable to form a coherent defense. When I finished my presentation, I turned to Jake. "So, honey," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, "is there anything you'd like to add? Any other families we should know about?" Jake couldn't even look at me. He just shook his head, defeated. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the table in front of him. "I think it's safe to say that our vow renewal is off," I announced to the stunned crowd. "Please enjoy the rest of the party. The cake is delicious." With that, I walked out of the reception hall, head held high. The videographer followed me, capturing every moment of my triumphant exit. In the weeks that followed, my life was a whirlwind of lawyers, divorce proceedings, and explaining the situation to our devastated children. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had done the right thing. I refused to live a lie any longer. As for Jake, last I heard, he had moved to Seattle to be with Melissa and their kids full time. Melissa had finally learned the truth and kicked him out, but he was trying to win her back. Good luck with that, Jake. Looking back, I don't regret my decision to expose Jake's lies in such a public way. Some might say it was cruel or over the top, but I believe he deserved to face the consequences of his actions in front of everyone who thought they knew him. Today, 6 months after that fateful anniversary party, I'm finally starting to heal. My kids and I are in therapy, working through the pain and betrayal. I'm focusing on my career and rediscovering who I am outside of Jake's lies. To anyone out there who suspects their partner might be living a double life, trust your instincts. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, remember, sometimes, the best revenge is served cold. Preferably with a side of PowerPoint. TLDR, discovered my husband's secret family, planned an elaborate reveal at our anniversary party, and exposed his double life in front of all our friends and family. Edit, wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for your supportive comments and messages. To address some common questions. 1. Yes, I have full custody of Emma and Ethan. Jake has visitation rights, but the kids are understandably angry and hurt right now, so visits are supervised and infrequent. 2. The divorce is still ongoing, but my lawyer is confident that Jake's deception will work in my favor regarding the division of assets. 3. Some have asked about Melissa and her kids. We've been in touch, and while it's been difficult, we're both trying to support our children through this. She was just as deceived as I was. 4. To those asking if I regret the public reveal, no, I don't. Jake had been lying to everyone for years. They deserve to know the truth. 5. For those wondering about the videographer, yes, I have the footage. No, I won't be sharing it online. It's for personal and potentially legal use only. 6. Thank you to everyone who shared their own stories of infidelity and betrayal. It's heartbreaking how common this is, but your strength and resilience are inspiring. Edit 2. Since so many of you have asked for more details about how this all unfolded, I'll try to fill in some of the blanks. It's been therapeutic to write this all out, so thank you for giving me the space to share. The days following the anniversary party were a blur of emotions and chaos. Jake tried desperately to explain himself, showing up at our house at all hours, calling nonstop, and even attempting to get our kids to talk to me on his behalf. I had changed the locks and blocked his number, but he was relentless. One particularly memorable incident occurred about a week after the party. I was in the backyard with Emma and Ethan, trying to have a normal family moment despite the circumstances, when we heard the sound of breaking glass from inside the house. Jake had broken in through a window, wild-eyed and disheveled. "Sarah, please, you have to let me explain," he pleaded as he stumbled into the yard. The kids screamed and ran to me, terrified by this version of their father they'd never seen before. I stood my ground, positioning myself between Jake and the children. "There's nothing to explain, Jake. We all saw the truth at the party. Now get out before I call the police." He took a step forward, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. I love you. I love our family. What I have with Melissa. It's not the same. You're my real family." I felt a surge of anger so intense it nearly took my breath away. "Your real family? As opposed to what, Jake? Your fake family? The one you've been lying to for 8 years? The children you've been a part-time father to while pretending to be away on business?" Emma, always perceptive beyond her years, spoke up. "Dad, how could you do this to us? To Mom? Don't you love us?" The look on Jake's face when he realized the full impact of his actions on our children was almost pitiful. Almost. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Of course I love you. I love all of you. I never meant for this to happen. It got out of control." That's when Ethan, my sweet, usually quiet Ethan, stepped forward. With all the righteous anger a 9-year-old could muster, he yelled, "You're a liar. You don't love us. If you did, you wouldn't have another family. I hate you." Jake recoiled as if he'd been slapped. I put my arms around both kids and said firmly, "You need to leave now, Jake. We're done here." As if on cue, police sirens sounded in the distance. One of the neighbors must have called them when they saw Jake break in. He looked at us one last time, a broken man realizing the full extent of what he'd lost, then turned and ran. That was the last time we saw Jake for nearly 2 months. While Jake was keeping his distance, thanks in part to a restraining order, I dove deeper into unraveling the extent of his deception. The private investigator I had hired, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, continued to dig into Jake's past. What we uncovered was both shocking and, in a twisted way, almost impressive. Jake hadn't just been living a double life, he'd constructed an entire alternate reality. We found evidence of a small apartment he kept in San Diego, a city conveniently located between Los Angeles and Seattle. This served as his decompression chamber of sorts, a place where he could transition between his two lives. In the apartment, Diane found a closet full of different clothes, a variety of cologne brands, and even slightly different styles of glasses. Jake had created distinct personas for each family. With us, he was Jake the successful marketing executive, always in crisp suits with designer frames. With Melissa and the kids in Seattle, he transformed into Jake the laid-back tech consultant, favoring casual wear and hipster-style glasses. But the real kicker came when Diane uncovered a third bank account, separate from both our joint account and the one he used for Melissa and the kids. This account showed regular payments to a nursing home in Florida. A bit more digging revealed the truth. Jake had a child from a previous relationship, a daughter named Lily who was born with severe disabilities. She was now 20 years old and required full-time care. I was floored. Not only had Jake hidden 2 families from each other, but he had a child he'd never mentioned to anyone. The layers of deception seemed endless. Armed with this new information, I decided it was time to have a face-to-face conversation with Melissa. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between LA and Seattle. Walking into that cafe was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I had seen Melissa in photos, but seeing her in person was different. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I imagined I looked much the same. We sat in awkward silence for a few moments before she spoke. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea. About you, about your kids. Jake told me you were separated, that you were only staying together for appearances until the kids were older. I never would have. If I had known." I believed her. The pain and shock in her eyes were too raw to be faked. "I'm sorry too," I replied. "None of this is your fault. We were both deceived." Over the next few hours, Melissa and I shared our stories, piecing together the elaborate web of lies Jake had spun. We laughed, we cried, and somewhere along the way, a strange sort of camaraderie formed between us. He told me he was an only child, Melissa said at one point, shaking her head in disbelief. Said his parents died in a car accident when he was in college. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Meanwhile, his parents have been pestering us for grandkids since the day we got married. They were at our vow renewal, for God's sake. As our conversation went on, I debated whether to tell Melissa about Lily. In the end, I decided she deserved to know the full truth. When I told her, she went pale. A daughter? She whispered. He has another daughter? How? How could he abandon his own child like that? It was a question I had been grappling with myself. How could the man I thought I knew, a loving father to our children and, as I now knew, to Melissa's kids as well, keep a disabled child hidden away? The confrontation. Armed with all this new information, I decided it was time for a final confrontation with Jake. I had my lawyer arrange a meeting at her office, ostensibly to discuss divorce proceedings. When Jake walked in, he looked like a shadow of his former self. He had lost weight, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes were sunken. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Hello, Jake," I said coolly as he sat down across from me. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation, don't you?" He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Sarah, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I'm so sorry. If you just give me a chance to explain." I cut him off. "Explain what, Jake? How you managed to juggle 2 families for 8 years. How you lied to everyone, me, Melissa, our children, her children, our friends, our families. Or maybe you'd like to explain Lily?" His head snapped up at that, eyes wide with shock. How? How do you know about Lily?" "I know everything, Jake," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "I know about the apartment in San Diego. I know about the different personas you created. And I know about the daughter you've kept hidden from everyone for 20 years. Jake slumped in his chair, all pretense of defending himself gone. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said quietly. It spiraled out of control. Lily. When she was born, I was young, scared. Her mother died in childbirth, and I couldn't handle a disabled child. My parents refused to help. I thought putting her in care was the best option." "And then you just erased her from your life?" I asked, incredulous. He shook his head. "No, I've always provided for her. I visit when I can. But I was ashamed. When I met you, I couldn't bring myself to tell you about her. And then, with Melissa, it just seemed easier to keep it all separate." "Easier for who, Jake?" "Certainly not for Lily, growing up without her father. Not for me or Melissa, living with your lies. Not for any of our children." Jake broke down then, tears streaming down his face. "I know. God, I know. I've ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness, Sarah. I don't know how to fix this." I stood up, gathering my things. "You can't fix this, Jake. But you can start by being honest, with yourself, with all of us, and especially with your children. All of them." As I walked out of the office, leaving Jake sobbing behind me, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The anger and betrayal were still there, but now there was something else too, a sense of freedom, of possibilities. It's been a year since that meeting with Jake, and life has settled into a new normal. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, and Jake has moved to San Diego, a central location that allows him to be somewhat present for all his children. Emma and Ethan are still struggling with the fallout of Jake's deception, but they're in therapy and slowly healing. They have limited, supervised visits with their father, and while it's awkward, they're working on rebuilding some kind of relationship. Melissa and I have become unlikely friends. Our children have even met a few times, bonding over their shared experience of having a father who lived a double life. It's strange and unconventional, but it works for us. As for Lily, Jake has finally stepped up and taken a more active role in her life. He's moved her to a care facility in San Diego and visits regularly. He's even introduced her to all her half-siblings. It's a bittersweet situation, but at least Lily is no longer a secret. And me? I'm rediscovering who I am outside of Jake's lies. I've gone back to school, pursuing the degree I put on hold when we started our family. I'm making new friends, exploring new hobbies, and slowly but surely learning to trust again. Life isn't perfect. There are still days when the pain and anger threaten to overwhelm me. But then I look at my children, at the strength and resilience they've shown, and I know we're going to be okay. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole ordeal, it's that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie. And sometimes, the most elaborate deceptions can lead to the most profound revelations about ourselves and the people we love. To anyone out there who's going through something similar, know that you're not alone. There's life after betrayal, and it can be beautiful in its own way. Stay strong, trust yourself, and don't be afraid to demand the truth. You deserve nothing less.